We are electric man. We've got electric hands. So come stand beside us and realize that the thing we must do is inspire. We're coming for you.
My dudes, we are live. What up, what up? Let me know in the comment section. Make sure you can hear me nice and clear. Of course, we have we're operating from the new Pangburn office PC that we just purchased. So many of you made donations to make it possible for us to be operating with this awesome new PC. All of our live streams should be much better quality now, so let me know if it makes a difference. It's good to see Amy, John Boy, Buster, Traversable, Andy, all you guys in the chat already. Please share this stream. We're going to be going through some really important information today. You just saw the official trailer for the Celebration of Science and Reason tour, which I'm super excited about. We just went on sale. We are starting in Canada, Montreal on April 12th, Calgary April 13th, and then April 14th in Vancouver. We are going to be adding Toronto on either end of that. It's looking like we might bring on a really special guest as a third for one of those events. I want to a third speaker. I also want to say that for the Vancouver date, YouTube sensation Arvin Ash, who has a very popular physics communication channel, is going to be joining us for that event. He's going to be kind of acting as moderator, third interlocutor. So I think that was a really, really good addition to spice up that event. So please go out and support the event. Get yourself a live event ticket. Of course, you have to be vaccinated in order to attend live events as it stands right now. So, you know, another excuse to go out there and get vaxxed and get boosted. You guys know my position on that. I very much am in support of you and your family, the rest of your family, getting vaccinated. You've seen we've had a lot of videos that I've been dropping on the channel regarding some of the protests that are happening up here in Canada. For the most part, it looks like they've been pretty peaceful, but there's been a few issues, and I've highlighted some of the issues, some of the higher points, I think, of these demonstrations. So yeah, everyone keep having conversations out there. Today we're going to have a really great conversation. Now, I love this new channel I came across. I've been spreading the video that we're going to be talking a lot about today all over the internet. Because there's a lot of people out there that heard the Joe Rogan podcast with Dr. Malone and just kind of took things on faith. Not much fact checking going on, or seeing where Malone might not quite understand what he's talking about, or he's getting some of the actual data wrong as well. So we're going to go through that today. But today my guest is Dr. Dan Wilson from the Debunk the Funk. Go over and subscribe, even if you have to quickly go over there. Debunk the Funk YouTube channel. I love this YouTube channel. He is a PhD in molecular biology. On his channel, he covers bad science while making good science accessible. His channel focuses, well, we're going to talk about that as well. Bad science versus good science. I don't think bad science is science. But yeah, we'll definitely get into that. His channel focuses mainly on pseudoscience surrounding the anti-vaccine movement. He earned his BS in biotechnology and molecular biology from Clarion University and his PhD from Carnegie Mellon University. His PhD research focused on how cells build ribosomes, the nanomachines in all of our cells that make protein. Dr. Dan Wilson, welcome.
Hey, Travis and everyone else. How are you doing?
It's so good to see you, and I'm so glad we were able to fit your afro in this little video frame.
Yeah.
How long have you been working on that?
Well, when did the pandemic start? I guess since then.
Nice. Well, I like the look. Me and my, I don't know if you know who this is. Me and my brothers grew up on a movie called Class Act. I don't know if do you remember that film with Kid and Play?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Yes. So that it reminds me of, I think it was Kid's haircut. But anyways, I can't grow anything like that.
Yeah.
When I try to do that, it just turns into this long wave thing. Right?
Yeah. I never liked big hair until I actually grew it out.
Yeah.
And I embraced it. But yeah, it makes me think of Undercover Brother.
And is it true? And is this scientifically proven that having hair like yours makes you have a big brain like Einstein?
To be determined. Still testing.
Okay, no. Awesome. Well, so what is so you started this channel. Well, first of all, what inspired you to start this YouTube channel?
Yeah, so I've always really been super passionate about science communication. It's something that I've been into ever since I've been on my science career path, and particularly science communication in the context of debunking pseudoscience, because I myself used to believe in a variety of conspiracy theories when I was younger.
Such as?
Well, I thought 9/11 was an inside job.
Yep.
Let's see. I loved watching Ancient Aliens. I still do, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
And a few health conspiracy theories, like that there's a cure for cancer that they're hiding and stuff like that. So,
well, when I remember being 20 years old, and I remember telling members of my family that the government is hiding alien spacecraft.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was so convinced because I'd watched this thing on Project Blue Book and the Disclosure Project and this guy, Dr. Stephen Greer. And I was like, he's a doctor. It must mean that he's talking about something credible here, and he has some kind of, I should listen to doctor, right? My parents have always told me, listen to your doctor, and I get that confused, and then,
Oh yeah, totally. It's easy to fall into that hole of seeing the quote unquote credible people saying wacky things, and you don't necessarily know how to refute what they're saying.
Right.
But it sounds like, I didn't know that. Maybe I should believe him.
Well, and a lot of people confuse authority, right? Scientific authority. Mm-hmm. They think that a layman guy couldn't ever ask a good question that's important to ask someone who is an expert, and then they think, well, on one hand I'm being told not to question the experts, on the other hand they're telling me question absolutely everything that comes out of the mouth of any expert, and don't believe it. It's there's this dichotomy at play. I think people suffer from false dichotomy.
Yeah, and it's also hard because now we live in a very specialized society where you are really good at the things that you do for your job, for example, and someone else is very good at the things that they do, and you kind of have to trust each other, right? You can't learn everything,
right?
And so, but then when, from your point of view, things look contentious, like it looks like experts are disagreeing, then it can become very confusing and difficult to navigate. And as we've seen in this pandemic, that absolutely happens, especially when science communicators aren't really, you know, doing a great job at the government level.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed that. What do you think the problem is there? The key issue is it not understanding the mind good enough? I think my personal argument is that there is a serious lack of philosophical integration in science communication that could really help. But what do you think is the key here?
Well, I can only speak like coming from the scientific community, that the general culture, the general attitude, for not universally, but at least for a lot of scientists in the scientific community, is that it's kind of a waste of time to do communication. That's a little bit of a harsh way to put it, but you can experience some pushback. Like, for example, if you're a graduate student or you're a postdoc and you want to go out and do more science communication, your advisor, the professor who writes the grants and pays you, might be like, no, I kind of want you in the lab doing stuff. I don't want you out there talking to people. And then if you go do it and then your experiment fails, then your advisor is going to be like, hey, well, you had time to do all this. Why'd your experiment fail? So it can be, that's kind of an example of how it can be a little off-putting. And so I think that culture, kind of combined with a lot of other things, leads to this kind of lack of ability to communicate effectively when scientists end up in their own professorship jobs.
Right. So this channel is a new way for you to act as a science communicator, which is great. And then you have, and your day-to-day job is?
Oh, I work in biotech.
Okay.
Yeah. So I work for a company called Eurofins, and I just basically do process science. So, for example, I'll receive samples from drugs in various stages of development or clinical trials, and I'll test them for specific parameters to make sure that they're meeting certain standards, or just if the group needs some data on a particular question about the drug itself. So
right.
That's the kind of stuff I do. I'm a very average scientist. Honestly.
So in other words, you've been bought by big pharma. Everything you say is in
totally.
support.
Yeah, no. No, it's in science, your options are either continue in academia. So you graduate from graduate school, which, during that time you're getting paid like very little for the hours you work. Then you go on to do a postdoc, which is like another 3 years, getting paid not much more ultimately. And then from there you do usually another postdoc and then you can go on to, apply for faculty positions, but you're not guaranteed to get a faculty job. And then you have to get tenure. And
right.
It's a very long and difficult road. And for someone like me who wanted to do hobbies and have a family, it just wasn't feasible. So I decided to go into biotech, which allows me to have a day job where I have time to do stuff like this. No problem.
Right.
Yeah.
So you put out a video recently that has, I call it going viral, because I know in the technical area of science communication, like people are always just like, the first 3 minutes, it didn't really grab me, I'm going to throw it away and go do something. When really, if you want to learn something technical about, virology or vaccine technology, you're really going to have to sit down and be ready to take in some real information. And that's maybe some of the problem that's been happening with, people's ability to take in the actual demonstrations, because people get the demonstrations confused with one's ought prescriptions that they make from the demonstrations. Sometimes people will think that there's a confusion or a difference of opinion on the demonstrations themselves, and maybe there is sometimes, and that's the beauty of science. We can make new models, But then, and there seems to be this gap of where people don't know if it's just a scientist's opinion or there's a competing demonstration happening.
Mm-hmm.
But typically there's not a competing demonstration happening. It's the kind of I guess where the opinion of the scientist or the science communicator comes in.
In this case, yeah, I mean, it is hard for people to navigate that field, right? They want fast answers. They want easy answers. It's natural for us to want to fit things into a model that, fits neatly into the human mind.
Right.
And, for science, in a lot of topics, you really have to do the work to read papers, to listen to a lot of different scientists, not just the contrarian ones.
Right.
And that's difficult to do. So in a time like the pandemic, when there's so much anxiety and uncertainty, and we genuinely don't have all the answers, when someone like Malone comes along and says, all these things that
I have a list.
take all these uncertainties and fears and wrap them up into, there's the enemy, there's the problem, and make it all real simple. That resonates with people, and so they accept it.
Right.
A lot of times.
And there's a lot of like confirming one's original bias coming out of Malone. So, okay, all of you who are listening know of Dr. Robert Malone's appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience. So let's go through some of these claims that were made. And again, I really encourage you guys to go over to Debunk the Funk, Dan's YouTube page, channel, and you'll find this video debunking Robert Malone. So first off, did Robert Malone invent mRNA vaccine technology? What about Caitlin Carrico?
Yeah. I said her name a little bit wrong in the video.
Okay.
Caitlin Carrico.
Caitlin,
I think the way you pronounce it.
Okay.
But yeah, no, he didn't really invent mRNA vaccine technology. So it's a complete misnomer, and I think really selfishly disingenuous of him to say that he invented mRNA vaccine technology. What he helped do testing on, because it's not clear if the idea was his advisors at the time or actually his. So while he was a graduate student doing a PhD, which he didn't finish his PhD, but while he was working toward a PhD, he did an experiment where he kind of wrapped genetic material, RNA in this case, in what are called cationic lipids. So it's just fatty lipids that encapsulate the genetic material, and those lipids then fuse with cells and deliver the genetic material into the cell, right? So that's a way to deliver genetic material into a host cell. So early versions of an mRNA vaccine, but it had to be changed. Almost every single aspect of it had to be changed in order for it to actually work as a vaccine. And he didn't do any of that changing, right? And he wasn't even the first to develop a system that delivers genetic material to cells using lipid materials.
Yeah, and after I heard this claim, I mean, if you get on Google and you do a little bit of research, I found the information you just mentioned, Dan, quite easy to figure out. That yes, he may have been one of the contributors, right?
Yeah, a contributor
to this, a contributor. But yeah, the inventor, I saw all over social media, people like, you're gonna disagree with the man who invented this stuff.
Oh my God,
that
yeah.
was the fallacy that was being thrown around. Because of course, you guys, if you invent something, it doesn't even necessarily mean that you know everything that it is you invented. That's not always going to be the case. So of course, let's try not to be fallacious about what that means.
Yeah, and let's be really clear here that the lipid components at the time that Robert Malone was doing his experiments, the lipid components were too toxic to use for humans. They wouldn't work in a real vaccine. The mRNA wasn't stable enough to actually last long enough to get good enough protein production so that you get a good immune response. And there were lots of individual things that had to be done to fix those problems and more. So for him to take credit for the technology, which, if he wants to say that he invented mRNA vaccine technology, he didn't invent the technology that now lets us have mRNA vaccines.
Right.
He helped contribute to an early version that didn't work.
Right. And which patents he owned for those have since expired, right?
Yeah.
That was your finding. That was my finding as well.
Yes.
So.
It's kind of like if, this isn't a one-to-one comparison, but it's like if Da Vinci had a patent for a fighter jet, but he never built one. It never worked. And then someone else comes along and actually makes one that works. You don't give credit to Da Vinci. You give credit to the person who actually did it. Right?
Who did it and made it work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You might say, there were some early ideas that so-and-so was dabbling with that really did contribute in some way to, where we are today. But yeah, you may not call that person the inventor necessarily.
Yeah. And I think his attitude is just really, again, disingenuous, because if you listen to what, some of the bigger contributors say, like Catalin Carrico and Drew Weissman, they'll say that, they're not quick to take credit for inventing mRNA vaccines. They say, like, it was a very big group effort. Lots of people were involved, and they're happy to have contributed to something that is now saving lives all around the world. That's a very, genuine an opinion that a view that a better person might have on the topic. Not this selfish, trying to take all the credit for yourself thing that Malone does.
Yeah. Do you think what do you think his rebuttal would be to that if you challenged him with that in a one-on-one? If you said, well, I think your motivation is, for fame, like it's a selfish motivation. What if he was like, why do you get that impression? Like, I am just talking to you about what I believe. I understand how it might look like that because I'm on the Joe Rogan Experience and stuff, but I really do believe what I'm talking about, and I'm not just trying to, make money or whatever. What would be your response?
I mean, I would say, you can believe that if you want, but it doesn't make what you're saying correct.
Right. So you would say, so like maybe at the core of what he's trying to do is, maybe a lot of people would think is morally good because he really is just talking about what he believes. But of course, it doesn't make the information that he got wrong correct.
Yeah, regardless of his motive, I think that it's important to recognize that he very much is misrepresenting the history of all the scientists who contributed to that technology.
This one baffled me, and I could tell in your video this one was kind of crazy too. The tweet that got Malone booted off Twitter, he references the fantastic video that he retweeted, which talks about animal testing being skipped, offered vaccine to control group after Pfizer clinical trial. So a few of these things that were mentioned in this video, which of course, again, if you get on Google and you simply do some basic searching for with the keywords involved, like was animal testing used in mRNA vaccine technology testing, of course you're going to find that. Yes, we did.
Yeah, with these COVID vaccines, they were on an emergency track, which means that a lot of the experiments that would normally be sequential were done in parallel, right? So people somehow think that means they skipped it. No,
or skipped steps. Like I hear that all the time. People are like, they skipped these steps, and I'm like, what steps exactly? And then they're like, time as a step, and I'm like, well, you understand how much you can do if your boss, say the world's scientific minds all spoke to one boss, and the boss said, whatever it takes, spend all the money you want, and bureaucracy be damned. We will all work overnight 24/7 to make sure that we get this thing cooking as safely as we can without skipping steps, and get this thing rock and rolling out to people and saving lives as soon as we can.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. And
that's what the current proof that we have out there. That's what I've been shown, and I'm willing to have my mind changed. But so far, the proof points to us not cutting corners, not and no one giving like some kind of like, you know, approval to something that was, you know, even potentially dangerous to any level that you know is beyond, you know, like the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory death rate that we have in the US. I think it's like 16,000 people a year die or something like that from non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, you can find all the data, like the preclinical trials, the animal trials, and everything that came after that for free.
Right.
And I link those things in the description of my video as well. So they're free to read. They're there. And if anything, the speed at which the COVID vaccines were developed and approved just shows how much science can do when it's given proper funding and attention. Right. So
yeah, I agree with that.
Every year scientists will advocate for more funding to go to the NIH to do more of that kind of stuff. And that it's really important to fund biomedical research. And that's what we get when it's actually like the priority in this country. So,
yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, like, look what happened when we decided we wanted to win the moon race, right?
Oh, right.
I say we, I'm not American, I'm Canadian, but you know, I'm just acting like an American today. But yeah, when you do something like that, it's like, yeah, this is our goal. We're going to do this. And that in a sense, that's like, you know, the world coming together. We're going to get this vaccine technology out and cracking, and we're going to monitor it. And this gets me to, of course, the Johnson & Johnson issue, which so many detractors just refuse to mention. Oh, where do I have it? Yeah. Risk. So people saying risks can't be discussed, you know, and this is going viral everywhere. I can't discuss risks. But if you look out at shows on television and on radio and everywhere, people are discussing risk. It's like the hot topic. It's the op-ed topic of the year or of the couple of years, right?
Yeah, it's like when, you know, someone makes a post on Reddit and they're saying, why is no one talking about this? And someone will say, dude, it's on the front page right now.
And dude, you're fucking talking about it right here.
Yeah.
You just said it.
You just brought it up. Yeah, it's wild how that just went by unchallenged in the Rogan podcast. It was weird because that was such a big story at the time when Johnson & Johnson vaccine got paused for that 1 or 2 weeks, however long.
But that one pulls, you know, some of these certain conspiratorial lines that people know what pulls at Joe Rogan's heartstrings, right?
Oh yeah.
If you've watched enough of Joe Rogan's discussions, he suffers from conspiratorial thinking. So, you know, a solid foundation in skepticism would fix this, no problem for him. If he just, you know, if he didn't dig his heels and engage in cynicism and conspiratorial line drawing, and then instead said, okay, here's the topic. I don't know very much about this, but I'm going to question and continue to question anything, including any kind of preconceived idea of any kind of like underground conspiracy or silencing or cancel culture or anything. Start from scratch every podcast, man, and sit there and just question and continue to question anything. I think that's a lot of people's, you know, a problem they have about Joe Rogan's show. They want to see him, you know, engage in some skepticism. I think that's a big thing. Yeah,
I think some honest skepticism would be nice to see from him. You know, I mean, I think it's very clear if you just watch, for example, the Malone podcast, and see that not once did he say, "Jamie, look it up. Jamie, we need you to Google this."
Right.
But if he interviews someone who challenges him or challenges his preconceived ideas, he'll be like, "Jamie, is that true?" Google that.
You make a really good point, man. That's not a point I hear a lot of people make, and you're right that well, you know, I'm not sure if it's Graham Hancock who he usually has on that talks about some wild theories about history, but I think sometimes he does do some fact checking with that, but I don't know if it's more to get the, or maybe he's asking more for the pictures. I don't watch enough Joe Rogan to be like an authority on his show. But I do find the show interesting. But I think there is something to what you're saying. It's like during this podcast with Dr. Robert Malone, they could have pulled up like, hey, wait a minute, what about this animal testing that was done on this date? What about these human trials earlier, in 2010 or whenever it was, and what about this stuff? And then I think Joe could have taken Malone to task a little more there.
He could have, and there are even some moments where Joe Rogan's very very incredulous. He's like, is that really true? I never thought that was true. And instead of asking anyone to look it up, he's willing to just sit there and listen to Malone say, yes, it's true. And he accepts it. No question.
Do you think when Malone says, yes, it's true, do you think he now believes it? Or do you think Joe's just playing host and he's still thinking about it? Right.
I mean, I feel like with Joe's personality, if he didn't believe something,
he wouldn't let it slide.
He would call it out. Yeah. I mean, that's what he seems to do, right?
This is an issue I want to talk to you about just after we're done, Malone. But whenever I know he feels very strongly, as I do, about the infant genital cutting culture that we have in the United States, that or in the West, that I think needs to be abolished. Because but anyways, on that topic, when someone gets on there and starts talking about, oh yeah, but what if the mother wants the son to look like, have a penis like the father? Like that should be her choice. Joe goes nuts. He's like, he's pulling up the information. He's calling, he's pretty well informed on that issue compared to a lot of other issues, I find. So, when he does have enough care in it, and I think he's looking to the actual evidence, I think he can do some good with it from an educational standpoint. But
yeah, he could definitely do a lot more good than what he does right now.
Are you like, what is your current, while we're just talking about Joe Rogan, are you a fan of this idea of taking away someone's platform or working to shut down someone's platform if they have guests on, or they themselves are talking about ideas and beliefs that they hold that you detest?
That I personally detest?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it depends, and it gets very complicated, right? I think there's a very clear line that we could all agree on. Like, there is a limit, right? If Joe Rogan was having people on who were like promoting pedophilia, or
right, which we have a law against. So the police could go there and shut it down, arrest them.
Maybe a better example would be like if he's promoting people who are like blatantly telling people to drink bleach to cure COVID or cure cancer. Right. I mean, it's not illegal per se to do that under the guise of like just throwing ideas out.
Right.
But if he were doing that, that would be really irresponsible. And if people's deaths were linked to that advice, I think we could all agree, like, dude, you got to stop, or we'll stop you.
I would say even in that situation, he would be charged. I think our laws kind of cover that. If they could actually draw the link, which I think is good. We need to make sure we don't allow people to harass with speech, which we cover that in most of the West, and also coerce people to do things that could act antithetically towards their well-being.
Right. Yeah, it gets, I think it gets very complicated. And I think that, telling people to be afraid of a vaccine that is very clearly far more beneficial than it is risky.
Right.
I think that's getting close to that line, and it gets complicated. I think that if he were to continue completely unchanged, just, if in the next few weeks he had Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on and Andrew Wakefield on, then I would be getting more to the point where I'd comfortably say, like, okay, I 100% think that he should not have his platform anymore.
Right.
As of now,
And would you think that should be enforced by policing, or do you think like are you saying, okay, Spotify should rid themselves, but then Joe Rogan can just go bring his podcast to his own personal website, right? Or do you think that should be shut down too?
Boy, it gets really complicated, right? Because if it's done by policing,
Yeah.
if it's done by policing, I mean, he would have had to have clearly broken a law, or else then it is
Unless you think we
violation.
need to upgrade the law, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand how people can be against public health. It really blows my mind.
It does frustrate me as well. Do you think we have to have absolute patience for people like Joe Rogan to try to reach out and to try to improve, as opposed to, because I'll go down. We were going to get into this after. Here. Where did I put that now?
Yeah, while you're looking for that, I'll just say I think it's. I mean, I'm someone who engages with conspiracy theorists in his spare time. I try to be as patient as I can, as I can be with people. So yeah, I always think it's worth having a conversation with him. I don't think it's going to help anything to just give him a slap and say you're stupid and then not talk at all about it. You have to try to teach.
Right.
And if it doesn't work, then that's tough. But if you don't try at all, then he's just going to continue to grow his bubble. He's going to continue to become more entrenched in what he believes.
So yeah, and when I see Joe Rogan talking to people, and I know you said you say to Joe Rogan while referencing Duesberg, right? That it is not okay to have an HIV/AIDS denier on your show. And then I've also heard you talk about how important it is to try to have patience when communicating with people you disagree with, which I agree with. And then, we talked about, and here's something. Does that patience, and you talked about a little bit, but what about for someone like Malone? Do you just not want to hear from Malone again publicly, or would you want to have a conversation with Robert Malone, or how do you go about something like that? Like if you had the opportunity.
I would talk to him if I had the opportunity.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily. If I had the choice, I would want to have it in private.
Right.
I don't think there's a reason to broadcast it.
Do you think?
Or maybe there would be. I don't know.
Here's my
hard
thought.
To think. Yeah.
Like you guys, I think I think this is a beautiful thing. So Joe Rogan, he's a very, very popular guy. He's got Dr. Malone on his podcast. And from that podcast alone, the amount of conversations and interest it has generated about what is actually true and going on when it comes to mRNA vaccine technology, I think is way, way grander than yes, some people might be convinced not to get vaccinated because of what is said. But for me, my interpretation is that group is much smaller compared to the greatness that happens through scientific or through intellectual discourse. And then you come along and make your beautiful video, your critique about that. And then that breeds more conversation, including the podcast we're having today. So I think all in all, and of course we never want to like sacrifice anyone because they've been convinced to be an anti-vaxxer from the Joe Rogan show. So now they've died of COVID because, we can draw a direct link because they heard that podcast and then nothing would convince them after. But I'm just thinking on a very large scale of what we want the intellectual zeitgeist to be. I see the more people we get engaged in the war of ideas on these issues, the better. What do you think about that?
I see what you're saying, but I do think that if I were to choose which reality to pick, I would choose a reality where Robert Malone had never gone on Joe Rogan's podcast, because I do think it's done a lot of harm. And yes, it sparked a lot of conversation, but I don't think it's necessary to have such a big blaze of misinformation to spark that event. I think that there's so much really interesting scientific discourse going on among academics, current academics, around this topic. There are so many questions that are being explored around, around the issue of COVID and vaccines and all that we're learning. I don't think you need someone like Robert Malone to come in and spark this big controversy. Unfortunately, what gets clicks
This
is more amenable to that controversy. But as someone who listens to a lot of scientists and reads their papers, I see a lot of the kind of back and forth data on some of the bigger unanswered questions as much more interesting than Malone making a recycled claim from 2 years ago.
So that kind of segues into this thing. I want to get your take on this. What do you think about the attention span for the demonstrable scientific data versus the attention span for the celebrity most viral extrapolations based on their understanding of the scientific data or what they've heard about it? There's a massive attention span for the latter, and a very low attention span for the former. How do we get people more interested in the actual demonstrable scientific data and not just what celebrities have to say about that data?
Yeah, you're asking a question that if science communicators knew the answer to, then we would have a much easier job. I mean, it's so hard to take a lot of complicated data that you spend months or years collecting and then distill it into a message that people can easily understand. Because to a scientist, you've done all this work, you want to tell people everything, but you can't do that because then, you're the one who knows your work best, and you're not going to teach everybody. You're not going to teach the world about your work very well in the short amount of time you have to reach them. But, I think one thing that people that might help here in getting people to be more attentive to the science instead of the soundbitey celebrities. If they like long form podcasts like Joe Rogan, which clearly many people can listen to, that's not a problem for them. Then, I would ask those people to go listen to another podcast that I like to plug a lot. It's called This Week in Virology. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's basically like scientists have these things called journal clubs where a lab or a department or some people within a department will get together, having read a paper. It's kind of like a book club. They read a paper, they come together, they talk about the paper, and that's basically what they do, except in podcast form. And it's virologists, immunologists, parasitologists, and they talk a lot about these really cool papers that are in those fields. And a lot of the papers that they talk about these days have to do with COVID. But they also do non-COVID stuff, and it's so good. They have guests, they have a core group of regular hosts. They're all actively publishing scientists.
Very cool.
Or science writers.
And what was the name of it again?
This Week in Virology.
This Week in Virology. Well, I'll be checking that out. A channel I really have enjoyed as well, I think they've done a pretty good job, is Medcram.
I've heard of them. Yeah. I haven't checked them out yet, but I've heard great things.
Yeah, Medcram, I highly suggest to anyone who wants to get like a not just base level knowledge, but to get into some of the actual details of virology. If you're actually interested in looking at what we have demonstrated thus far for certain things, they really do have one of the best up to date demonstration platforms out there. So that's Medcram. It's a good one. So yeah, okay, we exchanged some stuff there. But one thing that this shows is that if someone really does have a passion to learn about this stuff, take maybe a break off your long Netflix series or whatever, and just listen to one of these one or two of these podcasts just to get a sense of like the level of technical detail that is involved in a field like virology, because a lot of people think that it's like, and this isn't, I'm being a bit facetious, but you take two beakers together, you dump it in on some COVID-19, it's like, yeah, that killed it, let's put it into a vial and stick it in. It's not quite that. But it's very technical, very detailed. And not everyone has a ton of time, but most of you have, you're watching your favorite, Netflix series and things like that. So take a little bit of time if you want to share some information that your friends probably haven't heard about the actual details and what's been demonstrated. I think growing a culture of that is important too.
Yeah. And there's if you have friends that you're trying to convince to look at more of the science end of things, there's a medium for all of this. If you have a friend who likes to read books or papers all the time, of course, science has plenty of papers and books you can refer them to. But if they like long form podcasts like Joe Rogan, then there's no reason why they can't listen to something like This Week in Virology. Or if they like videos, I and other science communicators on YouTube try to make that kind of content.
Right.
And there's something for everyone. You just have to be aware that it's out there. And science communication doesn't often get the clicks. So a lot of people just don't know about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Well, that's, sometimes garnering a deeper philosophical understanding of your audience, their phenomenology, their, the way, the mistakes they may be making logically, so that can better understand how one tunes the scientific education so that they're not tripping over that common fallacy that's being committed.
Right.
That's one thing I would like to see out of the scientific community. I'm going to talk to Sabine Hassenfelder about this when she comes on and hear what she thinks about this. But maybe the future holds a place for a more philosophically literate scientific communicator. And because, as far as I know, having a solid foundation in logic, ethics, a few other philosophical fields aren't necessarily required, to get degrees or to be a scientific communicator. But I think it really helps, understanding the metaphysical nature of your audience.
Yeah. And, someone like me, I try to, you don't get to know your audience unless you actually talk with them. And so that's why I do things like provide my contact information in my videos so that, if someone who is an anti-vaxxer or has doubts or whatever end of the spectrum they might fall on, they can talk to me and I can have an actual conversation with them.
Yeah.
That was one of my goals of the channel, which now is becoming harder to do because more and more people will send me messages. But I try my best to actually respond and read all of them.
Well, just wait till you get 100,000, million subs.
Oh, I don't think a million's gonna ever happen.
Who knows, right?
I mean, who knows? But I don't think so.
So my eyes have been attracted to the art you have hanging on your wall. Did you create that?
No. Okay. So this is art from a guy named David Goodsell. Yeah, he is a biologist, but he illustrates a lot. And he painted. These are some of his works, and they were a Christmas gift to me. So I really like the artwork. He does like, semi-realistic images of what insides of cells look like.
Yeah, very cool.
It's pretty cool.
It's a way to combine artistic and scientific inspiration. What inspires you artistically? Were you ever into music?
Oh yeah, I love music. I used to dance. I used to be a b-boy.
Nice.
I don't do so much of that these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love music. I can appreciate if someone's really good at what they do, I can appreciate it.
Yeah.
It as an art form.
Cool.
Yeah.
Were you a theater kid growing up?
I was in two of my high school's theater productions.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. What productions were those?
One was Fame,
Okay.
and then the next year they did Wizard of Oz, which was like, Fame was like I could fit with the breakdancing b-boy thing, but
Right.
Wizard of Oz was like, I guess I'm just doing this to be with my friends now.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And did you play
yeah.
did you play one of the lead roles or
No, no,
no?
no. I was always just like an extra. I was
Oh,
a
okay.
dancer.
Oh,
So
okay, cool.
no, no,
Yeah.
I can't sing or act or anything. So no.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's good that you participated. I'm sure you created a lot of fond memories.
Oh yeah, it was fun. It was really fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. So Malone had a couple more
Yes.
faux pas here. Doctoral fraud conspiracy.
Uh-huh.
This idea that like just because a doctor could hypothetically, be this evil doctor over prescribing, doing these things to make more money.
hmm
What did you think about those claims?
They're weird. They're really weird. I mean, Malone seems to have this goal of completely discrediting like the medical hospital systems and what they're doing to treat COVID. Um, I think specifically he's talking about like doctors lying about COVID cases and deaths in order to get more money. Is that right?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that where
yeah,
he's talking about
yeah,
that? Yeah, I mean, so the thing is, in the US, there's a kernel of truth to that because the healthcare system is just all weird and messed up. That um, a doctor could get paid a little bit extra if they're treating a more demanding patient, like a COVID patient. But in Canada and other uh, countries with socialized medical care, um, that's not a thing. A doctor will not get extra
yeah,
anything
yeah,
for
yeah,
treating a COVID patient. So I mean, it just totally misses it totally misses like reality.
yeah. And I mean,
If it was a
yeah,
conspiracy, then are all these countries faking it somehow?
right.
Why are those doctors who aren't making any money faking it? What's in it for them? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, if a doctor was caught doing that, that's an
Oh, that's
automatic,
bad.
that's fraud. Like you mentioned in your video, that's just fraud, right?
Oh yeah, and audits. I mean, that'll get caught in an audit if they're lying consistently about that,
Yeah,
and
yeah, exactly.
they would have to lie consistently if they ever wanted to really make any amount of money
Yeah.
that would be worth risking fraud.
And
So,
also like a patient goes and gets a second opinion, right? Which is
oh
common
yeah.
in medicine. Then the other
hmm
doctor's like, "Wait, what? You were told what? You were prescribed what? Like you were."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, of
Yeah.
the millions of patients
But
being
ladies
prescribed
and
stuff.
gentlemen, that process we just went through and that back and forth, that's skepticism, questioning, continuing to question, anything that emerges when you're engaging in discourse. And, some of the other ways that a doctor would get caught, engaging in this kind of behavior. Claims about the efficacy of ivermectin and hydrochloroquine.
Right, right. Yeah, the two drugs that just people just can't seem to leave them alone. Yeah, I mean,
So what is it with
the
these things? Like what's the fundamental claim and what is the reality the way you see it?
I mean, the claims are that they work against COVID, and the fact that they work against COVID is being suppressed by people who want to. It's not clear what the motive is because the motive they might say is that they want to suppress working medications in order to push vaccines. But then we also do have medications that have been recommended and have some efficacy against COVID. So what's the deal there? Um, in reality, at the beginning of the pandemic, viruses are really hard to treat. There are very few actual medications that treat viral infections. The reason being, viruses hijack your cell's machinery most of the time. So it's hard to target a virus because it's actually using you to replicate. So you'd have to kind of target it without targeting you. It's very tricky to actually treat viruses.
Right.
But at the beginning of the pandemic, we wanted antivirals, so a whole host of drugs were tested to see if they would work.
Right.
Old drugs were tried. People tried to repurpose them. People tried to design new drugs. So many things were tried, including ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and they just didn't work. They were tested in clinical trials, randomized clinical trials, and very consistently, we just don't see efficacy.
Yeah, and he made the claim of like, what about Japan, right? Like
Japan, which didn't use ivermectin.
Right.
They don't. You can go onto the public health website for Japan and see their recommended treatments for COVID, and ivermectin is not there.
Why is he saying that? If like you can easily go and search this, do you think he believes that like they did use it, but they were forced to change their language? Like,
I wouldn't be surprised if he suggested some conspiracy, but I really, when he says stuff like that, towards the beginning of making my channel, when people would ask me what are the motivations behind these people, and I say, I give them the benefit of the doubt. I just say that they're genuinely misled, that they believe what they say, and they're just misled until they prove me otherwise. And since I've started my channel and have said that, so many people have, to me, proven me otherwise, that I now am becoming a little bit more cynical. But when I look at Malone, he should know better than that, right? Like, he should know better that Japan did not use ivermectin to treat COVID. That had nothing to do with their drop in cases. But he says it anyway, because maybe this is just pure speculation, but maybe it's because he knows that people are going to believe it and that it's going to get him attention. And I do think that at the end of the day, that's probably his main motivation, is he's trying to recoup some recognition and attention that he feels has been robbed from him. I think that he just has felt really bitter and burned by his experience in academia.
When you were just describing that whole thing, it made me think of Eric Weinstein and his gripes with Harvard.
Yeah, I know a little bit about that story, but not a ton. But yeah, I think, because like I said in the beginning of this conversation here, Malone didn't finish his PhD. He was working towards it, and then he had a falling out with his advisor. So he dropped out of the program. We call it mastering out, when you get a master's instead of a PhD. And then he went on to medical school. But he took with him this obvious bitterness over this, this cationic lipid technology that he was working on. He tried to claim credit for it. His advisor said, obviously was contending that claim. They didn't get along. And I feel like that bitterness has kind of shaped who he is as a person.
Interesting.
That's just my, from listening to him a lot and learning about his background, that's my guess.
Okay.
As to his motivations.
COVID PCR tests are inaccurate, is the claim.
No, they're not. PCR, I mean, that's the whole advantage of it. It's very, very sensitive and very accurate. It's any person taking molecular biology in college right now would be able to tell you that the test is designed to be specific. And these COVID PCR tests have been extensively tested against all other normal human pathogens that would be detected in a laboratory test, and it doesn't detect them.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what his. Again, I'm trying to figure out what was his argument as to why they're Is he just saying that like there's too much interference and you don't really know what you're detecting, or?
He didn't really elaborate in his conversation with Rogan. I was surprised to hear him say that because I mean, I don't listen to him a ton, but I hadn't heard him say that anywhere else.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what his particular reasons are, but normally people say that PCR isn't accurate. It can't be used for diagnosis. It detects other coronaviruses.
Okay.
They say all that stuff that we know isn't true.
Right. And by the way, everyone, when you do find Dan Wilson's show channel, Debunk the Funk, he provides all of the information and links, his demonstrations in his in the description of his videos. So make sure when you do go over and see this, don't just take Dr. Dan Wilson's word for it. Follow the links in the description and go through and look at the demonstrations. That's really important. There was another claim, the bullet in the head claim being counted as a COVID death, how COVID deaths are determined. I think it's very clear on the CDC website, what they do to show where the comorbidities on the CDC website. So what's this all about? That someone, the claim was that someone shoots themselves in the head and they're found to have COVID, and it's claimed as a comorbidity, or
that. Yeah, that again is a moment where I was shocked, honestly, when I heard him say that and listening to it for the first time, because my reaction was just he knows that that's not true. At least he should know that if someone dies of a gunshot wound, then that death is not considered natural. And in order for a COVID death to be considered a COVID death, the first criteria is that it has to be of natural causes, either, natural aging process or disease of some sort. So that was just crazy. But it's such a prolific idea among conspiracy circles that COVID death numbers are inflated. And so he said that because I think it resonates with that circle. They hear him come on Joe Rogan's podcast, state all of his inflated credentials, and then he says something like that and they think, yeah, that's right. This whole thing's a farce. They're lying to us, and it makes sense to them. So I think that's why he said it. But I mean, we could go through why exactly it's wrong.
It's hard to, it's hard to, well, if anyone wants to know, they can go check the video and they can go in the description of the video. I wonder, it's hard to know how many people heard that conversation with Malone and how many took his word for it. Right. I don't know. I don't know how we would ever get an actual number on that, and how many people were just like, no, Joe's just talking to some guy and he doesn't know much about this particular topic, and he's not necessarily in agreement with this person, but he's just kind of going along with the conversation. And a lot of his audience are kind of like that too. They're not necessarily buying into what Dr. Malone's saying necessarily. What do you think about that? Do you think it's reasonable to believe that large portions of Joe Rogan's audience just were buying what Malone was selling?
I can't put a number to it, but I get the sense that a lot do buy into it.
Where do you get that sense from?
Well, in part from what I see so I lurk a lot in COVID, anti-vaccine conspiracy-esque circles,
right? Just
to kind of keep tabs on what people are thinking, what they're saying. And that idea that, in particular, the gunshot thing, that idea has been a popular one for,
I've heard it argued
for years.
Well.
Yeah. And people's reaction to it, at least that I've been able to see, they hold him up as this highly credentialed person, and they take, from what I can tell, everything he said very seriously. So again, I don't know how many people out of his tens of millions of viewers, I don't know how many people
Yeah.
took
It might be
seriously,
five,
but
it
a
might
lot.
be 5% that are really loud, right? Or maybe
It could
10%.
It could absolutely
You
be.
know,
Yes.
but you would probably not to put words in your mouth, but you would probably argue that many people spreading, this information could very well be quite bad, right? From a
Yes.
well-being perspective.
I think it is bad. Yes. Yes.
Right. Okay, and we got to deal with this. The ovaries, not my ovaries, menstrual cycles. Because of the detection in the. Yeah. So go ahead on that one, because I've actually spoke to a lot of women who had a lot of vaccine hesitancy, or if we're using that soft term. I think George Carlin would be turning in his grave if he heard that we were adding vaccine hesitancy instead of just saying like anti-vaccine. But yeah, so people, women that want to thinking about having kids, want to be mothers, a little bit of hesitancy around the vaccine. What can you tell them about that?
Well, it's been very well studied. That's something that drug manufacturers worry a lot about.
Yeah.
I mean, for most drugs, it's very hard to test it on pregnant women because not a lot of drug companies want to take that risk. But for COVID vaccines, it's been studied a lot. And we've seen that it's very safe for pregnant women. I could tell a personal story too and say that my wife was vaccinated at 7 months pregnant. She got her 2 doses around that time, and we now have a healthy child, and she didn't have any issues.
I thought you were going to say we now have a healthy half fish, half human.
Well,
no problem there.
She can. It can be a healthy baby with some scales. It's
yeah,
fine.
Exactly. Like, come on, a little scale, extra leg.
Red eyes,
very large brain, red eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, some claws.
5G coming out of the.
We haven't reached that yet. We have to get the kid vaccinated first,
right?
For that to happen,
yeah.
For that to kick in. But no, seriously, that's a personal story I can tell. But I know that other people have their personal stories. So then how do we figure out which personal story is reflective of, the general experience? We have to look at the data, and the data say that if you're worried about your unborn baby, it's far, far worse to get COVID than it is to get a COVID vaccine. The rates of stillbirth and miscarriage and other complications with pregnancy are far, far greater if you get infected with COVID than if you get a vaccine. And the data for this are all public, available to read. And Malone's fears, Malone pushing fears, I think is really gross. Honestly, I think that's to scare pregnant women is disgusting, in my opinion. And what he says is just easily demonstrably false. He brought up, we can go into it if you want, but
sure. Yeah.
He brought up that Japan data that a lot of people like to reference that showed that lipid nanoparticles are going to the ovaries. If you look at the actual data, it shows that about less than 1% of the material that was injected ended up.
It's like 0.001 or something.
It's very low.
Very low. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very low number. It's in one of the tables in that paper. It's a very low amount that actually goes to the ovary, and it's number one, it's negligible. Number two, no pathological effects were observed in association with that. So they didn't observe any unusual things in the tissue of the ovaries. And this was a much bigger injection than what a human would get. So this was in animals. And so to look at those results and say that there's some big red flag here, and then go on a weird rant about rabbis and menstrual cycles. I thought that was a weird rant. I don't know about you, but
yeah, strange.
I was listening to it, taking notes for the first time, thinking like, what the hell is this guy talking about? And I was expecting Joe Rogan to come in any minute and be like, wait, hang on now. But he just was like, whoa, yeah. but yeah, the data just don't support that at all.
All right. And guys, by the way, when we're referencing the data, I'm going to take the links, all the links that are in Dr. Wilson's video about Malone, and I'm going to put them in the description of this podcast as well, so that you guys can easily reference them. And then the last thing on my list to end off with Malone, we dealt with the mothers. Now we got to go to the children. Vaccinating children against COVID. He spoke very negatively towards this.
Yes.
And what do you think about that?
Also disgusting. Every anti-vaccine movement focuses on children and pregnant women as like just little points to push to scare people. And it's super clear right now that for children, even though the risk of the risk of negative consequences from COVID infection are lower than other age groups, it is far riskier to get infected with COVID than it is to get a vaccine for children.
Right.
I mean, just this month, we're hoping to see that Pfizer is going to approve vaccines for children over the age of 6 months. And if you're going to ask me if I would get my kid vaccinated, I would say yes in a heartbeat right away.
Yeah.
Because it's not just death that is an outcome for COVID. There's also long COVID. There's multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, which is also rare, but a horrible outcome that you would not want to see your child go through as a parent. And you can prevent all of that by getting them vaccinated. The numbers are there. You can see a very clear gap in the vaccinated and unvaccinated when it comes to hospitalization.
And of course, not to be confused with that getting vaccinated is a perfect protectant.
Of course
right?
not.
Of
Nothing
course
is.
Not. Yes.
Nothing is.
Yeah.
No.
And do you
vaccine,
agree? Is it roughly 93% around there protection? Would you say
for children when it comes to hospitalization and death? It's close to 100%.
Sorry, I meant the protection against getting the virus itself.
Oh, infection.
Yeah, infection.
Yeah, it's in the 90s.
Okay.
For kids.
Yeah.
But one important point that I think it's important for everyone to understand is that vaccines are not meant to prevent positive tests. That's never been the goal of a vaccine. The goal of a vaccine has always been to prevent negative health outcomes. So in the case of COVID, it's to prevent hospitalization and death. Those are the metrics that really matter. Of course, cases, we want to know how good does it protect against getting infected. That's useful to know. But if we make that the goal, then, I think we're not going to feel like we're obtaining success, because to prevent infection, you need a high titer of antibodies, right? And with any immune response, whether you get infected, get vaccinated, whatever, your body will have an increase in vaccine levels, and then it'll contract because your body can't produce that level of antibodies constantly. It's too much energy, right? So what you're left with after that is an immune memory. So you have B cells and T cells that are going to remember what was in the vaccine. And when you become exposed to that later, they're going to recognize it faster and be able to mount a more robust, efficient immune response that protects you from getting sicker, getting hospitalized, or dying.
You mentioned, sorry.
I was just going to say the last point is that, just to reiterate that this has always been what vaccines do. If you look at polio vaccines, the goal there was always to prevent paralysis and death. And that's what they do. People who are vaccinated against polio can still get infected and shed polio through their feces mostly. But they don't get sick. And so if you're vaccinated and you don't get sick, then you don't have a problem, right?
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
And you mentioned long COVID. I wanna jump into that a bit. What's the level of demonstration we have that long COVID is you know what do we know about it? I guess is what
So
I'm asking.
we don't know a ton, but we know that it can be clinically recognized. So post-COVID infection, it's if you want to look for literature on it, they'll mostly call it post post-acute sequelae in COVID. Um, so you'll be able to find more literature if you Google that instead of long COVID.
Yeah. I guess
Um,
what was
but
popping into my mind, are they
yeah,
relying on like uh the proclamations of people who have had COVID to determine that this is a real thing, or have we measured this to be to leave real markers and have a measurable effect on the biology?
yeah. So you can measure, you can have lung scarring
Okay.
post-COVID. You can have measurable changes in your um, s- what's the word, neurological capabilities
Okay.
after you have COVID, which you can see that for patients who do have long COVID, you can measure them, uh, and then you can measure them going away over time, which is a good sign.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
have a friend who was describing it to me, an old hockey friend, or
mhm,
both him and I have both had very bad concussions,
mm,
and he described it as, yeah, it was like my post concussion syndrome coming back, and it kind of like feeling like he was in this fog, but then it eventually dissipated. But he had this going on for a few months.
yeah, people call it brain fog.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the story there is actually similar to like um, previously viral infections have been associated with chronic fatigue syndrome. Uh, and for a long time, doctors didn't believe patients, like they didn't
Right.
believe their patients had something real.
Right.
Um, but now, since so many people are getting sick with COVID at the same time, it's like that signal is amplified and we can see it a lot clearer.
Mm.
So we can see very clearly that this thing is associated with COVID cases, and we can do more to learn more about it.
Right. So let's
Yeah.
now let's turn to mandates quickly. I want to
Uh-huh.
get a sense of what you think about mandates. So my thinking, and tell me if you agree or disagree. My thinking when I heard we're going into a pandemic here. Yep, we got it. We got to lock her down, mask up, social distance, get this stuff until the technology has a chance to catch up, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
To mitigate the spread so that we can get the technology caught up and administered. Now, now that we've had, now that that's happened, let's say in the UK, Boris Johnson decided, okay, now that we're at that stage, let's open up.
Mhm.
I'm somewhat of that feeling as well, that now that the technology is caught up, there's going to be at some point we have to say, okay, people, if you're gonna still choose not to get vaccinated, that's going to be your choice, or you can keep up with your boosters and your vaccines. But we're gonna drop mask mandates, and we're gonna essentially drop the mandates. How do you feel about that? Is it too soon? What and if it's too soon, what do you need to see for you to feel like it's morally sound to do so?
Yeah. So I think that where we are now, there's no reason why we should be locking down.
Hmm.
Um, we have all the tools to prevent the need for a lockdown. Um, Ideally, we should never have gotten to that point in the first place. Um, and with masks and vaccines, I think that we can have sensible recommendation based policies that uh, can consistently keep either numbers low or keep people out of the hospital. Whatever goal we have in mind, I think the goal should be keeping people out of the hospital, because we're going to see spikes and dips in cases. That's just going to be the way of it until more of the world is vaccinated.
Right.
But I don't think at this point we need to have lockdowns. When it comes to mask mandates in certain situations, I do see that as being a good thing. For example, on an airline.
And until when? Like what would need to happen, do you think, until you would feel okay with people having the masks off in an airline?
I think that, if either if cases were really, really low, or if everybody on the aircraft were vaccinated.
Okay.
But personally for me, I think now moving forward, I'll most likely wear a mask whenever I get on an airplane.
Okay.
Because I mean, it's kind of, when you think about it, it's like you're breathing everybody else's air in that airplane. People from all over who could be carrying whatever. It just makes sense to me to wear a mask in that situation. But as far as mandates go,
But do you think that should be a personal choice more?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I think that when it gets to the point where, cases and hospitalizations are low enough that we're not straining the healthcare system.
Okay, so that's your metric, kind of like the strain on the
so.
healthcare system. Okay.
I think because that's what really makes a pandemic that much deadlier, right? Because you have a infectious virus spreading very quickly, making a lot of people sick all at once. And then they flood the hospital system. A lot of them die themselves. And then while they're straining the hospital's resources, people can't get normal health care. Like the normal health issues that are constantly going on can't get as much attention.
Right.
So we see more people, getting sent home when they shouldn't, or more people skipping out on cancer screening because the hospital just can't deal with them. More people getting pushed back on their transplant date. It all trickles down to this point where this pandemic is not just affecting people who get the virus.
So you would want to wait until, generally the hospitals declared we're not under pressure.
Yeah, it gets difficult with international travel because it's like, where do the hospitals have to be low everywhere in order for that to happen?
Right.
It gets tricky, and I think that's why, airlines have now currently have just a blanket mask mandate.
Right.
So yeah, it's for something like airlines, it's tough to know. I'm not a policy expert, so
Right.
but when it comes to like communities and regionally, I think that's a good metric to go by. Like, what's the caseload? What's the hospitalization rate in my area? That should be a good metric on, how legislators might want to think about mandates. Yeah, in my opinion.
I have one more question to you
Sure.
you, and then we're going to take a quick half-hour break. Then we'll meet again on Discord because everyone's going to want to engage in the Q&A. This has been awesome. The next question I want to ask you is, what? Actually, there's one thing following that, but what is? Do you think the greatest lesson we have learned that we didn't know before with pandemics that we may have learned and will be able to carry forward into the next crisis if one does strike us?
Well, I'm not sure if we've quite learned the lesson, but I think the important thing to realize is how unprepared we are for a massive pandemic like this. Because the wealthiest nations of the world really dropped the ball in the beginning of the pandemic to prevent it from spreading in early stages. And we almost got lucky in a way that this happened with SARS-CoV-2 because its case fatality rate has been around 2% for the whole pandemic, which that's not small. That's pretty significant. But there are viruses that have the potential to go pandemic that have much bigger case fatality rates. We're talking in the range of like up to 60% for something like bird flu, which has been a very concerning possibility for a very long time for infectious disease scientists.
Right.
If something like that were to go pandemic, I mean, that could be society ending. And we have to be prepared for that. We need better surveillance. We need better stockpiles. We need technologies ready to go.
More money
For science.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so I think this pandemic has shown just how unprepared we are for something like that. And I hope that our leaders learn that lesson.
Yeah. Now my last thing. So yeah, like I was saying before, I'm quite an advocate to get child genital cutting to stop being practiced in the U.S. and Canada. Have you ever looked into that issue much?
Not at all.
I would, and so we don't have to have a conversation about it. But I usually point people to doctors opposing circumcision.org. But yeah, that would be perhaps a very good debunking video for you to look at that could really bring a lot of attention to the issue, because I think it is a big one, a big medical ethics issue. But I wanted to pitch that idea to you because I think it would be a good video. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm gonna, for the channel, I'm mostly gonna stay in the realm of anti-vaccine.
Yeah.
Vaccines and cancer.
Yeah.
I think are the two. Cancer is like the furthest I've gone away from vaccines, but I think I'm going to stick to those issues.
Okay.
With all due respect.
Yeah. No. No, it's all good.
I don't know. I don't want to dive into something that I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't want to dive into something that I wouldn't be a specialist in.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on, everyone. Dr. Dan Wilson from Debunk the Funk. Again, go and subscribe to his channel. Check out the videos. What's the charity that you give your ad revenue to, by the way?
I give to multiple charities,
Okay.
but the one I recently publicly gave to was Save the Children. They do lots of things, but they have a specific fund for COVID relief for children. So, one thing that Malone doesn't talk about, unsurprisingly, is that I think in the US, at least, it's gotten up to over 170,000 children have lost their either a primary or a secondary caregiver to COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And that is far
Terrible.
More traumatic than wearing a mask.
Terrible.
So yeah, the fund does stuff to help children like that all around the world. So that's what I gave to for the Malone video.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much, Dr. Dan Wilson, for everything you do. I really enjoy your new channel and keep it going. I saw your most recent video. I really enjoyed it too.
Good.
But we'll see you on Discord in about a half hour.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for having me, Travis.
Dan. Yeah.
And I'll see you soon.
Sounds good. All right, everyone. Dan Wilson. Now, I really enjoyed that discussion. It's good to take some time to engage in critiques of, especially in the realm of science, of some nefarious claims that are made. We have to take our time to do that. It's really important. This falsification process, when someone makes a claim, we can seek to go and falsify it, and that's what Dr. Dan Wilson is doing on his new channel. I'm reading some of your guys' comments. I will get caught up. I will go back and read your comments. I try not to read while I'm engaging in the conversation because I want to stay connected with my interlocutor. Again, Debunk the Funk. Podcast 60 is in the books. I'm going to head over to the Discord server right now, have a quick break, and all of you are invited to join us. Let me drop the Discord link for you. I don't know if moderators already dropped it, but yeah, there's the Discord link for you guys. Come and join us. You can have your questions answered. Looks like there's some fiery comments already. This will be a lot of fun to read. All right, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. This has been the Pangburn Podcast, and let art and science inspire. Thank you to the moderators. Special thanks to John Boy. Thank you.